NaLyssa Smith's departure from the Indiana Fever has everyone talking. After being traded to Dallas, she didn't hold back. Smith's final words to her old team have sparked major controversy. Meanwhile, the Fever have made a bold move by trading for Sophie Cunningham, a player who could redefine the team's future. Is this a game-changing trade or just another failed experiment? What does this mean for Caitlin Clark, and does it set Indiana up for success? NaLyssa Smith's time with the Indiana Fever is officially over, and it didn't end quietly. After being traded to the Dallas Wings, she wasted no time making her feelings known. While most players keep things professional after a trade, Smith took a different approach. Instead of a simple thank you message or a classy farewell, she fired off a parting shot that had fans and analysts raising their eyebrows. Her words weren't just a goodbye, they were a direct statement about how she felt the Fever treated her. Excited to play for an organization that believes in me. That one sentence set the internet on fire. It wasn't hard to read between the lines. Smith felt like Indiana had given up on her. She felt undervalued, overlooked, and pushed aside. But was she right? Or was this simply a case of a player not living up to expectations? Because while Smith was throwing shade on her way out, the Fever were making moves that signaled they were done waiting around for potential to turn into production. Enter Sophie Cunningham, a player whose arrival in Indiana might just be the best thing to happen to this franchise in years. Now, Sophie Cunningham is a good player. She can shoot the three. She can 3-and-D it. She's pretty good on defense. She's fast. I think the Fever are looking for the fast pace. I think bringing Sophie over is definitely going to spread the floor a lot more. But before we talk about Cunningham's impact, let's break down exactly why NaLyssa Smith's time with the Fever came to an end. Smith entered the league as the second overall pick in the 2022 WNBA draft. Indiana saw her as a cornerstone piece, someone they could build around for years to come, and for a while it looked like they had struck gold. Smith's rookie season showed flashes of brilliance. She averaged 13 points and 8 rebounds per game, proving she could hold her own in a league filled with elite talent. The potential was there. The problem? It never turned into consistency. By the time the 2024 season rolled around, Smith wasn't the player Indiana had hoped she'd become. Her scoring dipped, her rebounding numbers declined, but most importantly, her overall impact on the game started to fade. She went from a promising young star to a player who looked lost on the court. The mistakes piled up. Defensive lapses became common. She struggled with shot selection. And when it mattered most, in clutch moments, she was often on the bench instead of on the floor. For a team trying to turn the page and build a winning culture, Smith didn't fit anymore. That's the reality. Smith saw herself as a foundational piece, but the Fever were moving in a different direction. They wanted players who could adapt to their fast-paced, high-energy style of play. Smith, for all her talent, simply didn't fit into that vision, and that's when the trade talks started. It wasn't a matter of if Smith would be moved, it was only a question of when. And when the deal finally happened, sending Smith to Dallas and bringing Sophie Cunningham to Indiana, it became clear that the Fever weren't just looking for a fresh start. They were making a statement. Smith's reaction was immediate. She removed every mention of the Indiana Fever from her social media within minutes of the trade being announced. Then came the Instagram bio change. And then, the not-so-subtle dig at her former team. For fans watching all of this unfold, there were mixed reactions. Some still believed in Smith's potential and felt Indiana gave up on her too soon. Others, they were glad to see her go, saying she wasn't the player Indiana needed. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Smith is still young, still talented, and in the right system, she could turn things around. But Indiana didn't have the time or the patience to wait and see if that would happen, because the Fever aren't playing the long game anymore. They want to win now, and that's exactly why Sophie Cunningham's arrival is such a big deal as well. So in the same day as they get Natasha Howard, they get Sophie Cunningham, possibly adding 2 starters while also bringing Kelsey Mitchell back, and in year 2 of Caitlin Clark. So the Fever are title contenders right now. Cunningham brings something the Fever have been missing. A hard-nosed, no-nonsense, high-energy presence who doesn't just play the game, but changes the culture of a team. Her three-point shooting alone makes her an instant asset, but her impact goes beyond the numbers. She's tough, she's fiery. She gets under opponents' skin, and most importantly, she's a winner. That's the kind of player you build a winning team around, and that's why the Fever made this trade. For Caitlin Clark, this could be a game changer. Cunningham is the type of teammate who will have her back. She's going to knock down big shots, play tough defense, and bring an edge to the team that they desperately needed. And let's be honest, when you have a generational talent like Caitlin Clark, you don't waste time waiting for players to figure it out. You surround her with the right pieces immediately. That's what this trade was all about. Cunningham fits the modern WNBA game perfectly. She can play multiple positions, she can stretch the floor, she can guard the league's best perimeter players. Smith, on the other hand, she's still trying to find her identity in this league. That's the difference. The Fever didn't just swap players, they upgraded their mentality, their culture, and their ability to win games right now. The Fever's coaching staff saw the writing on the wall. Smith wasn't adapting to their system, and they weren't going to force it, so they went out and got a player who fits. It's that simple. Now the question is, what happens next? For Indiana, the pieces are falling into place. Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and now Sophie Cunningham. That's a core that can do serious damage. For Smith, she's heading to Dallas with something to prove. Will she thrive in a new environment, or will her struggles continue? That's what we're about to find out, but one thing is for sure. Indiana is done looking backward. They're building for the future. And with Cunningham in the mix, that future looks a whole lot brighter. This trade wasn't just about replacing a player, it was about changing the entire trajectory of the franchise. And the Fever aren't looking back. Now that the dust has settled, it's time to really break down what this trade means for Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever's future. Because let's be clear, this trade wasn't just about moving on from NaLyssa Smith. It was about reshaping the team around their new franchise star. Caitlin Clark is the most anticipated rookie in WNBA history, and Indiana had to make sure they were building a team that could complement her game. And that's exactly why Sophie Cunningham's arrival changes everything. Clark is an elite playmaker. She's a floor general who can score from anywhere. But to truly unlock her full potential, she needs teammates who can spread the floor, play tough defense, and move without the ball. That's where Cunningham fits in perfectly. First, let's talk about spacing. One of the biggest concerns for the Fever heading into the season was floor spacing. Caitlin Clark thrives in an open court. She needs room to operate, whether she's creating for herself or setting up teammates. Aaliyah Boston is a dominant post presence. She works best when she has space inside to dominate the paint. Kelsey Mitchell is one of the best shooters in the league. She needs teammates who can draw defenders away from her. The problem with NaLyssa Smith, she didn't help with spacing. Smith's lack of a consistent outside shot made it easier for defenses to collapse inside, making life harder for Boston, Clark, and Mitchell. Defenders could sag off her, daring her to shoot from mid-range or beyond. That meant less driving lanes, fewer open looks, and more contested shots. Sophie Cunningham fixes that immediately. She's a career 38% three-point shooter, meaning defenses have to respect her shot. They can't afford to leave her open, which stretches the floor and gives Clark more room to work. This is a huge win for Indiana. Cunningham doesn't just shoot threes. She lives behind the arc. That means defenses will have to stay honest, opening up opportunities for Clark to attack the rim, for Boston to work inside, and for Mitchell to get cleaner looks. That's exactly what the Fever needed. Now let's talk about defense. Another issue Indiana had with Smith. She struggled defensively, she wasn't quick enough to switch onto guards, and she wasn't strong enough to dominate in the paint. That's a problem, especially in a WNBA that's getting faster and more versatile every year. Cunningham, she can guard multiple positions, she can switch onto smaller guards, she can defend bigger wings, she plays tough physical defense that wears opponents down. That kind of defensive versatility is a game changer for Indiana. Think about it. When you're building around a superstar like Caitlin Clark, you need players who can cover weaknesses and make up for defensive lapses. Clark is an offensive powerhouse, but she's going to need help defensively. Cunningham provides exactly that. She plays with intensity, she's not afraid to get physical, and she brings an edge that Indiana has been missing. Now, let's talk about something else that Cunningham brings to the Fever: toughness and leadership. This might be the most important factor of all. Indiana has been rebuilding for years. They've had talent, but they haven't had the right mentality. Sophie Cunningham, she changes that. She's a gritty, in-your-face competitor. She's the kind of player who sets the tone in the locker room and on the court. And that's exactly what Caitlin Clark needs in her first season. Clark is coming into the league with massive expectations. Every team is going to go after her. Every game she's going to get pushed, fouled, and tested. That's what happens when you're the biggest name in the sport. And who better to have her back than Sophie Cunningham? Cunningham is known for standing up for her teammates. She's a physical, fearless enforcer who isn't afraid to mix it up when things get chippy. That's going to be huge for Caitlin Clark, because let's be real, Clark is going to face a lot of pressure. The last thing she needs is to feel like she's carrying the entire team on her shoulders. Cunningham's presence will take some of that pressure off. She'll be there to lead, to fight, and to bring that no-nonsense mentality that winning teams need. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. This trade isn't just about swapping Smith for Cunningham, it's about sending a message. Indiana isn't just trying to be competitive, they're trying to win now. They're building a team that fits Caitlin Clark's strengths and maximizes their talent. Let's look at what their core now looks like. Caitlin Clark, a generational talent and elite playmaker. Kelsey Mitchell, a lights-out shooter who can create her own shot. Aaliyah Boston, a dominant big who can control the paint. Sophie Cunningham, a floor spacer, defensive enforcer, and emotional leader. Natasha Howard, a veteran big who adds experience and toughness. That's a scary starting five. And guess what? They aren't done yet. This is just the beginning of what the Fever are trying to build. Now let's flip things around for a second. What does this trade mean for NaLyssa Smith in Dallas? It's a fresh start. Smith didn't fit in Indiana. She struggled to adapt to their system. But in Dallas, she gets another chance to prove herself. Maybe that's exactly what she needs. But let's be honest, this trade was more about Indiana than it was about Smith. The Fever aren't dwelling on the past. They're focused on building the future. And with Caitlin Clark leading the way, they're making sure she has the right teammates around her. Sophie Cunningham is one of those teammates. She's not just a shooter, she's not just a defender. She's a winner, and that's exactly what Indiana needs. So, when we look back at this trade in a year or two, will we say it was the move that turned the Fever into contenders? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Indiana isn't looking back. They've made their decision. They're all in on Caitlin Clark. And with Sophie Cunningham by her side, this team just got a whole lot tougher. So did Indiana win this trade? Is Sophie Cunningham the missing piece the Fever needed? And what does this all mean for Caitlin Clark's rookie season? One thing's for sure, this Indiana team just got a whole lot more interesting. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think NaLyssa Smith deserved more time, or did Indiana make the right move? If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And hey,